when was your first undercover job? Like, when was the first one?
Well, one of the first ones involved an individual by the name of James Orlando Quintana, who was based in Denver, Colorado. I was assigned to my first post of duty. I had just gotten out of the academy for the most part, and I was assigned to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I get a call that they needed an undercover agent to penetrate this organization, which was one of the top 5 heroin trafficking networks in the country. James Orlando Quintana was a very interesting character. You know, he had already served time in prison. You know, he was a prison leader. You know, when, it was said that when he went to the telephone to make a call within the prison, no matter who was in line, they all had to step aside and let the Godfather make the call. You know, there was no waiting for him. So he was a very cunning, but also a very vicious, individual. And I initially had an informant that we paroled out of prison to make introductions. He made an introduction to a very low player in Quintana's organization, was not able to take it any further with him. And one day we see one of his Quintana's prime lieutenants at a bar. So they called me. I was on a date, mind you. So I had to tell the date, sorry, but I've got to go. And I got in my car, drove to this bar, and I'm sitting there. I cannot see the individual because it's packed. So what I did is I started to play the role of the high roller and buy everybody drinks in the bar. So everybody was quite happy. And then it started, people started to filter out. And then I saw Isaac Rubali, who was the lieutenant, sitting, several stools away from me. So I started to engage him in conversation. I said, hey, do you know a better place, a nightclub of some, stature? And he said, yeah. He said, follow me, we'll go over there. We start talking, and he tells me he works for Quintana, that Quintana is bringing in sizable quantities of heroin from the state of Sinaloa in Mexico. And the state of Sinaloa, Vince, is the birthplace. It's the cradle of most significant drug cartel leaders in Mexico. So he was buying the heroin there, smuggling it into the United States, selling it throughout the entire Southwest. Later, he sets up a meeting and he says, hey, my friends are here. We were at a bar again. And so I go to the back. Quintana is there with another individual who was like his brother, a guy by the name of Henry Gutierrez. So we start talking. I tell him I was from New Mexico, that my main business was trafficking drugs, but also engaged in armed robberies of jewelry stores. So he starts to ask me questions, and I answered all of them. And later we were able to get some diamonds from a jeweler in Denver, and I used those to trade Quintana diamonds for heroin, and I was wearing a wire. So we had him, engaged in conversation, and then we had a truck with a camera close by, so we were also able to get him on video. Delivery was made later that night of a quantity of heroin, and so we took down Quintana. And by the way, Vince, later on, after he was convicted, he was being transported back to Leavenworth by U.S. Marshals, and the car was intercepted by his people, and they threatened to kill them. And Quintana says, no, don't kill them. I was treated very much with respect by him. So they threw him in the trunk of the car. And Quintana was later found in a residence in Kansas City, and he told his people that were there with him to leave. He gave them about $10,000 each, and then he committed suicide, shot himself in the chest. So that was the end of James Orlando Quintana. But that was one of the first major undercover roles that I engaged in.
I am an actor as well by trade, and so I've been thinking about different roles, and I'm like, man, incredible.